This is Justin Reed, your Hebrew professor. Welcome to this video lecture for Hackett chapters 2 through 5 with a focus on the Hebrew vowels. Please note that this lecture will cover Hebrew vowels but will not discuss schwa or hatef vowels, which are not mentioned in Hackett chapters 2 to 5. In order for you to get the most out of this video, please follow these instructions. Number 1, for every video lecture, you should have Hackett open and in front of you. Most video lectures will follow the same order as Hackett in my presentation. This lecture and the first lecture are a little bit different in that regard. Nevertheless, you should want to use Hackett's book and mark important pages. Take notes that you can use as a constant resource. Number 2, open the PowerPoint slides uploaded on Google Classroom. That file should match what I'm doing on the screen. To review what we learned today, you can always return to the PowerPoint, which is much easier to navigate than a video. Number 3, remember, you have control over this video. Pause the video when you need to process. Look at what Hackett has written in the corresponding section. The difference between her explanation and my own might be helpful. Rewind and rewatch anything that might be confusing. Perhaps, when you watch the explanation a second time, you'll understand it better. Number 4, make note of anything that you still do not understand. In class, we will review whatever people have difficulty with, but I will not present the same lecture a second time in its entirety. Number 5, please enjoy and rewatch this lecture as necessary. As we look at our Hebrew vowels, we'll start on the right side of this chart, which is how we always read in Hebrew. On the right side, you see the column vowel type. We see the 5 vowels we're familiar with from English: A, E, I, O, and U. Often, people will categorize Hebrew vowels into only 3 types: A class, I class, and U class vowels. It's important to remember that vowels are within a certain class because there's cases where a vowel might reduce or lengthen, and in those cases, the vowel will change only within its own class. Now, if you look at the next column, you see what's called irreducibly long vowels. I said vowels might lengthen or reduce. Irreducibly long vowels are already long and will not reduce. We'll talk more about each of these vowels when we get to them, but these categories are important for you to remember. The next category we have are long vowels. In that column, you see 3 long vowels. And in the final category, we have short vowels, and you see 5 short vowels. One of those vowels is in red. That vowel is called kametz katan, and it's a vowel that looks exactly the same as another one that we're learning today, but you won't have to worry about that until chapter 10. So now let's jump into our Hebrew vowels, starting with short vowels. It's important that you remember which vowels are short, long, and irreducibly long, because that is going to play into how we divide up syllables in Hebrew. At the top of the slide, you can see the letter bet, and that letter bet has a vowel under it. That vowel is called patak. Patak has an A sound, which is a short A sound, like in English when we pronounce the word father. Ah, ah. So you would pronounce the Hebrew on this slide as ba. The next vowel that we're learning is hirek. Here you can see the letter bet with a hirek underneath it. That one dot is hirek. Hirek is a short I sound, like the letter I in the English word bit. So if we read what's above, we might pronounce it as b, b. The next vowel that we have is segol. At the top of this slide, you can see the consonant bait written with a segol underneath it. Those three dots, shaped like an upside-down pyramid, are segol. Segol is an E sound, and it would be pronounced like we pronounce the E in the English word bet. So above, this Hebrew would be pronounced be, be. Sometimes a segol will be the last sound in a word. In those cases, you'll see a hey at the end of that word serving as a mater, a mother of reading, a mater lecciones, indicating that the word ends with a vowel. That hey would not be a consonant. The final short vowel that we're learning is kibbutz. There you see a bait with three dots and a diagonal under it, and those dots are the vowel kibbutz. Kibbutz is pronounced like the two O's in the English word book. So you would pronounce the Hebrew on this page as b, b. Although there is one other short vowel that we could talk about, kametz katan, we're going to talk about that vowel much later in chapter 10. So now let's transition to our long vowels. The first long vowel that we have is kametz. Kametz has an A sound just like the A sound for patak. It's the A sound in the English word father. So the Hebrew on this page would be pronounced ba, and it would also be pronounced ba if it had a patak instead of a kametz under that letter bait. When you have a kametz as the last vowel in a word, you're going to have a hey written as a mater at the end of that word. As we go back to our chart, you can see that patak and kametz are both A-class vowels. Kametz being the long vowel, patak being the short vowel. The next vowel we have is tsere. Tsere are those two dots that look like snake eyes under the letter bait. Tsere has the sound A, as in they, A. So we would pronounce the Hebrew on this page as be. When tsere is the last vowel in a word, you'll usually find a hey as a mater at the end of that word. As we go back to our chart, you can see that tsere and segol are both the same class vowels. Many people would call them E-class, others would call them I-class, but they're the same class vowels. So in this case, if a vowel lengthens, if it's a segol, it would lengthen to a tsere, and if it's a tsere, it might reduce to a segol. Next we have holum. Holum is a dot that's written above the Hebrew letter and to the left, which is the direction we're reading, so right after the consonant that we're reading. Holum has an O sound, like in the English word pose. So this Hebrew would be pronounced bo, bo. And finally, coming back to our chart, we see holum is an O-class vowel, and it's a long O-class vowel, and the short O-class vowel, kametz katan, is the corresponding vowel. We are not going to look at kametz katan right now. Finally, we have our irreducibly long vowels. These are long vowels, but we're also going to learn about vowel reduction as we keep going in this class. And in those cases, these are the vowels that will not reduce. That means they will not change to a shorter form of a vowel in the same class. They will stay the same. The first irreducibly long vowel that we have is called Hirek Yod. And as you see, it's a combination of Hirek and Yod. It's also called Hirek Gadol, and Gadol means big or great. When you see a Hirek Yod, you would pronounce it like the I in the letter machine. So the Hebrew on this page would be pronounced B, B. Next, we have the irreducibly long vowel tsere yod. And as you can see, it's a combination of tsere and yod. And, lucky for you, it's pronounced exactly the same as tsere. So you would pronounce the Hebrew on this page as bay, bay. Finally, we have shurek. Shurek is a vowel that looks like a vav with a dagesh in it, but technically it is a vowel. And it is a vowel that makes a U sound or a double O sound, as in mood. So you would pronounce this as boo. In some grammars, shurek and kibbutz are treated as if they're pronounced exactly the same. In some books, hirek and hirek yod are treated as if they're pronounced the same. In both cases, when people treat them as if they're pronounced the same, they pronounce the letter always as if it's the long vowel. For us, we are going to distinguish the two, which is how Hackett teaches us to pronounce them. So here, for your shurek, you're going to pronounce it as boo, and if it was a kibbutz, as buh. For your hirek yod, you're going to pronounce it as b, and for just a hirek, as b. Hebrew also has what's called a defective spelling. Sometimes we have something written where you would expect a hirek yod, and instead you'll get a hirek, or you'd expect a holem vav, and instead you'll get a holem, or you would expect a shurek, and instead you'd get a kibbutz. Those are cases that we'll talk about later, but that's the reason on this chart why there is a parenthesis around those three letters alongside the irreducibly long vowel. People who are familiar with a certain word and what to expect there would know when to pronounce a hirek as a hirek yod, even if it only looks like a short vowel hirek. Your final irreducibly long vowel is holem vav. Holem vav will look like a vav with a dot directly above it or slightly to the left of it. It's pronounced exactly the same as holem, the O in the English word pose. So this would be bo, bo. One more ingredient to help us pronounce our Hebrew correctly is learning how to pronounce diphthongs. These are combinations of two vowel sounds. Fortunately, some of them we can pronounce as if it's only one of those sounds. Other ones, it will hopefully be intuitive how the two sounds come together. All of these vowels are combined with either vav or yod. Now, I taught you to pronounce vav with a V sound. That's the way Hackett teaches it, and that's the way some grammars teach. Other grammars teach you to pronounce vav with a W sound. A W sound is how waw or vav would be pronounced in ancient Hebrew, and it's how correspondingly Arabic pronounced this, and it's how Arabic pronounces its consonant that corresponds to that one. We are going to pronounce it with a V sound, which is how modern speakers of Hebrew pronounce it. That means that technically the combination of one of these vowels and a vav wouldn't sound like a diphthong anymore. But in ancient Hebrew it was a diphthong, so we are continuing to classify it as such. The first diphthong we have is a combination of the irreducibly long vowel hirik yod and a vav. You would pronounce a hirik yod plus a vav as Eve. This pronunciation should make perfect sense with how we've already learned how to pronounce hirik yod and how we've already learned how to pronounce vav. So there's nothing strange about this diphthong. So you would pronounce this as beeve, beeve. Another diphthong that should not confuse us is the combination of sere and vav or sere yod and vav. In both of these cases, we would pronounce it as ave, which makes sense as a combination between a and a vav. So bathe is how you'd pronounce either of the two Hebrew syllables above. Now this one does not make as much sense for all examples. Here we have either a kametz plus a vav, a kametz yod vav, or a patak and a vav. In each case, you would pronounce it as av, which makes sense if it was a kametz plus a vav, or a patak plus a vav, but it doesn't make sense if it was a kametz plus a yod plus a vav. So this is one, only that one in the middle, where you might say, that's strange, and you need to remember how to pronounce this diphthong different from what you might expect if you were sounding it out. Next we have a combination of kametz and yod or patak and yod. It's slightly different from what you might sound out. This is pronounced I as in sky, the English word sky. So both of the Hebrew syllables above would be pronounced by, by. The next diphthong makes sense with how you would sound out this syllable. A combination of holum, vav, and yod, or holum, yod, would be oi, as in boy. And in fact, that's exactly how you would pronounce the Hebrew syllable above, boy. The final diphthong is a combination of either shurek and yod or kibbutz and yod. In both cases, it is the sound ooey, as in the English word gluey. Both of the Hebrew syllables above would be pronounced buoy, buoy. And that concludes our Hebrew lecture on vowels. Once we learn how to pronounce syllables, we'll have all the pieces that we need to start reading Hebrew.